Uh, Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this Siwaliks series webinar. Today we have Rajiv Patnaik from India. It's going to be a very interesting talk because we are receiving first presenter from India. Rajiv will be talking about the biostratigraphic and paleoecological implications of Neogene and Quaternary mammalian fauna of India. Bob will be obviously introducing the speaker in detail, but I would like the audience and participants know that there are a few potential speakers for this webinar series lined up. We have Peter Cleft probably talking next week, the coming week, coming Wednesday, then Andrew Meeks, then Lisa, then Yanni Nejman, and Peter Zattler. We have also some proposals for speakers. They are not yet confirmed, but obviously we will be updating the list. So I'll now let Bob introduce the speaker and take it away, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irfan. And Irfan is in Calgary. He's from the University of Peshawar, from the Center for Excellence. And we have Mukhtar Ghani, who is our Zoom master using Microsoft Teams in Quetta from the Geological Survey of Pakistan. We're extremely grateful for the help and the collaboration that we've received in putting this seminar series together. We do have a series of speakers coming up that are scheduled, and also a few who have not yet have their dates nailed down. And then we're also still we are still open to some people who might be interested in presenting. And so we anticipate that this seminar series will continue for the next several months. And it's a great pleasure for us to be able to show a variety of presentations from different disciplines to people who are interested in the Siwaliks. Tonight's speaker, Dr. Rajiv Patnaik from Punjab University in Chandigarh in India is coming to us. He'll be speaking about the vertebrate paleontology in the Siwaliks and looking at the implications for ecological change through time as seen in the fossil record. And it'll complement the lecture from Catherine Badgley and from John Barry, and also the lecture that we had earlier from Muhammad Akbar Khan from Punjab University in Lahore. Dr. Rajiv Patnaik has his PhD is from Punjab University, but he did a pre-doc in Germany and a postdoc in France. He's covered a lot of ground. He comes originally from Baripada, which is a little bit just near Calcutta, and he's been interested in paleontology for a long time. And it's a great pleasure to welcome him to the seminar series. And he will speak for maybe 45, 50 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers afterwards. So I invite those of you who wish to stay with us, and we can have a nice gubshup after his talk. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Patnaik right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Irfan. Thank you, Dr. Mukhtar, Gary, Catherine, and all those who have joined from good morning to from India. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I did my PhD from Chandigarh, of course, under Professor Sahni, who is one of the pioneering vertebrate paleontologists. And I did my PhD on micro mammals. So the first stuff I saw were small, tiny little rat teeth to begin with, and that fascinated me a lot. And then I went on working on with people like Thierry Serling, John Flegel, of course Elvin Simons at one point, who invited me to Egypt to Fayum for several times. So I had that opportunity to wander around in Sahara. So I have kind of, my career has been kind of influenced.
I've lost sound.
Yeah, we've lost video and sound.
I can hear you.
We still have Rajiv, I guess. Yeah, still there.
So I'm assuming that he might be signing back on again.
Yeah.
I see him in the guest list, but I don't see his picture anymore.
He's here, but he's muted. Professor.
Okay, now is it okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. There's something. Maybe I just clicked some wrong button.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's all right. Yeah.
So I hope you can see the first slide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So just to give you an idea what I'm going to speak about. Basically, I chose this topic to provide some general information, not very specialized, in the sense that I expect a lot of students would be joining. So the main Neogene and Quaternary localities in India are along the Himalayan foothills, that is the Siwaliks. Some we include Karewas also, because they are the Pliocene sediments there. And then up in the Himalayas we have Ladakh, where also we have some late Oligocene, early Miocene material coming. So beside the Himalayas, we also have stuff from peninsular India. So you see on the western side there is a can you see my arrow?
Yes.
That's, yeah, okay, great. So that's Kutch here, which is westernmost part of this very state called Gujarat. Here also we have found a lot of Neogene mammals. And then there is a small island here, Piram Islands. Late Miocene mammals have been found from this very place. And some recently some mammals have been found from mainly marine deposits in the east. That is eastern state of Orissa. And then there are some stuff from eastern state of Tripura. So just to give you a background, I would be talking about the main geological and faunal events that sort of shaped the biostratigraphy of the Siwaliks or the Neogene and Quaternary mammals, sediments, and which of course I have added literature and data from Pakistan, Nepal. So I've kind of compiled the main events and the biozonations, biostratigraphy. And then what kind of paleoecological studies we have done, in fact, my students and my colleagues, to find out what kind of diet these animals had and what kind of ecological condition they lived in. And then would also suggest or maybe venture into what kind of future prospects we have, what kind of directions the new generation should take in order to address some of the interesting issues. So I'll take you back to the KT boundary. Can you all see the slide, KT boundary?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So India was an island, almost an island, close to Madagascar some 65 million years ago. And then uh, uh, it had its own fauna and flora. And you have Africa also kind of an island, isolated from Asia, Eurasia. Then we have, as India moves from southern hemisphere towards the north, it passes through tropical areas to through the equator, and then gathers the uh, fauna and flora according to the climatic conditions. So we start finding around Eocene, Paleocene, Eocene boundary. We get a lot of lignite deposits in Gujarat and Northeast. So they contain fauna that were kind of similar to Madagascar to begin with, and some fauna was also similar to Africa and Europe. And then the collision happens, which led to a change in the biodiversity. So you have the lot of northern elements, the Asian elements coming in, replacing the Indian endemic fauna and flora. So uh, by early Oligocene, you have a kind of division in a way, where you have Laurasia theres and Notoglyris, that includes rodents, lagomorphs, primates. And then on one side, the other side, you have the Afrotheres, which included elephants and hyraxes and creodonts, uh, aardvarks. So when we go further uh, towards early Miocene, there were the Africa get attached to Asia. So that was a big change, in the sense you now have a connection, a land connection that allowed uh, African elements to migrate into Eurasia, and the Eurasian elements could now uh, seep into Africa. And the basin, of course, the foreland basin, which was a huge, covering a huge area all the way from Gujarat in the west, in the northeast as well, and then you have uh, the 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 spots from where we have found the mammals, which that includes like the late Oligocene, early Miocene, Kargil, Kasoli, which is close to Chandigarh, then of course Bukti in the west, in Pakistan, Zindapir, and then we have a lot of stuff coming from Kutch. So who were the early migrants? Early migrants, as I just mentioned, uh, immigrants were like the elephants, which were not there to begin with in the Indian subcontinent, and later on aardvarks and other elements would come in, and Asia contributed towards the bovids, the lagomorphs later on, the carnivores, rhinos, and some of the rodents. So so some of the key dispersal event that sort of define biostratigraphy in a way in the subcontinent is like you get first evidence of, for instance, elephants or ancestors of elephants, proboscideans, like the Dinotherium, the Gomphotherium, then followed by some of the early apes, and then hippos, and at some point the monkeys. And from north and east also there were immigrants, like the Hipparian event, which first occurs in Europe and then in India, in the subcontinent. And there were likewise several like the Lagomorph event. So these events, these immigrations have kind of helped us in a way uh, to to build the biostratigraphy. Sometimes we could in fact date sites based on their first appearances. So when we look at where we look at the subcontinent where we have found these mammal bearing sites, we see these yellow dots here in the Himalayas and in the west. These are early Miocene sites, and then you have the brownish dot. Uh, there are these middle Miocene sites, and then the red ones are the late Miocene sites. So by late Miocene, we start getting some of the sites in the peninsular India as well. There is one recently. There is one middle Miocene site as well in Kutch. We have just found mammals from there. So Pliocene still in the Himalayas. Pliocene stuff sediments are not found yet. Terrestrial sediment not found it in the peninsula, and Pleistocene, of course, it's all over. So when we look at the Siwaliks, uh, Siwaliks, as we all know, spreads from west in the Potwar and goes all the way towards the east. And we are kind of, we paleontologists are kind of fortunate that we have been helped by the paleomag guys, because they have been able to provide us time frames to tie our findings to these very sections which have been well dated. So in India, when we, of course, Pakistan area is fairly very nicely dated based on tuffs and paleomags, as Gary was just mentioning. In India also, over the years, people have been able to build a kind of strong framework where paleomag dating has been done. Wherever we do not get these paleomags, or the sections, paleomagnetically dated sections are little away from the sites, we tried our level best to date those sites based on the biostratigraphy, which is kind of very well addressed in the Potwar, and we use those ranges to date our sites. And in the north, we have the Karewas, the famous Karewas, Pleistocene, and those sediments, these fluvial equestrian sediments, have also yielded some of very interesting mammals. So these are some of the paleomagnetically dated sections, right from Jammu on the west and almost Katgodam, Uttarakhand in the east. So there are several, almost 16 sections have been dated. So we have tried to tie our localities, physically tracing to these very sections. Wherever we failed, we did our best by doing the biostratigraphic correlation. So to begin with, I'll take you to the northernmost part, where we have found late Oligocene or early Miocene mammals. We are yet to date these sites. We are trying to do the paleomag, because it's a very important locality all the way in Kargil, Ladakh areas. So we have these morass deposits, and these deposits have yielded some of very interesting mammals. And I'll just mention few of them, not all of them. So you just get some broad idea about what are the main mammalian localities and what are the main mammals that have been found. So when we look at the site, this is the Kargil locality. You see usual molassic deposits where you have these bands of sandstone and paleosols. So these are quite dark in color and maroon colored sediments. And these sediments have yielded some very interesting material like the tragolids. So these are being studied now, and they sort of represent the very early tragolids or early lineages of tragolidae. So beside that, beside these tragolids, we have also found some snakes, some other material like fishes. But one very interesting find was of rodents. That is of a rodent that has been that was thought to be extinct in the Miocene. So we have found a rodent that represents a diatomid or phallomis, and that today lives in a tropical rainforest areas like Laos. So in fact, people found this rodent right in the at the market of Laos in 2006, and so it is a kind of a living fossil. So what we see today, Kargil, which is a dry area, uh, is it was a tropical rainforest of some kind. Then we move on to another very interesting site, that is Middle Miocene locality, just north of Ramnagar, which has yielded a new ape. Recently, we published this, and it is one of the few discoveries. Like in the last 100 years, this is the first hominoid. So Siwaliks are famous for Sivapithecus and Krishnapithecus and Gigantopithecus, but this was a new ape upon a hylobatid we have just reported. Then also we have found an adapid, a civil adapid, which we named as Ramada adapis. So when we look at the fauna of Siwaliks, particularly the Ramnagar area, the fauna overall looks very similar to Chinji type locality. So because we do not have a paleomag date here, we have used Chinji biostratigraphy to correlate our to date our localities. Now Chinji fauna, when we look at the Chinji fauna and see, there are several of these mammalian lineages, and the most important ones were like the rodents. Like we have a short-ranging rodent called Antimus, which we have found from Ramnagar, which sort of has a range from around 12.7 to 12.5 to around 13 or 14 million years. So that sort of constrained the locality. So even if we do not have a paleomag yet, we one of my student is doing he has started measuring the making the logs and started doing the paleomags. Soon we'll get some data, but till then we use the biostratigraphic ranges. So Then we move on to another very important and interesting site, Haritalangar, where Gary started his research, in the sense that he dated this way back in mid 80s, and it is a classic section because not only sedimentology wise, but paleontologically we have several forms, like the famous Gigantopithecus, which also known as Indopithecus, because it has been shown to be a little different from the uh, the the Gigantopithecus of Pleistocene age. And also we have Siwapithecus, we have Krishnapithecus, and many smaller primates, Tupaya and other tree shrews. So a a lot of samples stuff have come from this very site. Now the issue here is, you can see it's now all forested, but 20, 30, 40 years ago, Gary would tell you that this was all barren, and it was very easy to measure this section. So most of the stuff come from just below the temple here. So now you can see it's all been forested. Anyway, so this very site, since this has been very well dated, so we could very well place our mammalian findings, uh, and tying them to the paleomag dated sections. Uh, we have also, of course, we have some rodents also, very interesting rodents, and wherever we find these rodents, they tell us a great deal about the ecology as well as the stratigraphy. So when we look at the Potwar uh, rodents and rodents from Haritalanga, we find some similarities and some dissimilarities. Now I'll take you from the Himalayas to the west, to the peninsular India, that is the Kutch. Now Kutch is a place where a lot of work is being done these days, and and we have in fact been able to find lower Miocene, middle Miocene, late Miocene material, uh, and recently Siwapithecus, this very mandible, the maxilla has been reported. So focus is going to be now on this area where we have these sites like Tapar, Pasuda, Palasava. Now these have not been dated paleomagnetically, so we would be relying on the biostratigraphy, rodent biostratigraphy or biochronology. We have some all sorts of mammals, including a Dinotherium we have recently reported. So going to another very interesting site, which is towards the east, that is the eastern state of Odisha here. And here also we have some mammalian evidence of mammalian lineages, where you have mostly the late Miocene marine deposits, and within these marine deposits you do get some conglomeratic layers which yield some mammalian remains. So we have a Swede and a rhinoceratid, and also recently we have found some quaternary stuff in the upper part of the section. So then I come back to these were all Miocene, late Miocene till late Miocene deposits, and coming back again to the Siwaliks, where we have the Pliocene and Pleistocene stuff. So this is a place very close to Chandigarh, just north of Chandigarh, some 15 kilometers north of Chandigarh, which is a section that has been paleomagnetically dated called Masol, and this has yielded a fauna which is very similar to the tatrod fauna of the Potwar Plateau. So we have it is a kind of an anticline here, and the lower beds are of tatrod, that is Pliocene, late Pliocene, I would say, and the upper beds are the famous Pinjore deposits, which is not very far, just a few kilometers east of this. The Pinjore town is somewhere here. So tatrod and Pinjore deposits are exposed all very close to in the vicinity of Chandigarh, and a lot of work has been done. Our problem was to figure out how to tie the earlier finds when there were no paleomagnetically dated sections. So we have tried our level best to put those sites in perspective and try to build a biostratigraphy, which which is shown on this very slide, where you have these uh, this left hand side is Karewa, of course. These are the Pliocene sites, like the Patiali Rao is the section I was talking about, the Masol section, which is just which lies north of Chandigarh, and then Parmandal Uttarbeni section, Jammu side, that Gary just mentioned. It has been very well dated. There are tufaceous mudstones here, and uh, it was not no problem in tying the mammalian sites. And of course, Karewas in the north, those have been very well paleomagnetically dated, uh, and we were able to place our localities into the logs. So all these sites, Patiali Rao, Ghaggar river section, and Nada, these are all within 15 kilometers of Chandigarh. Haripur is another 50 kilometers, you can say, towards east. So all these sites are very close to Chandigarh. They are fairly well dated, and we could place our localities or tie our localities into these sections. So now I will take you to the central part of India, that is another very interesting site of called Hathnora, from where the only hominin that has been recovered so far. People think that this is a archaic sapien. So now we are into the Pleistocene. So the Quaternary deposits I just mentioned, there were several places where Quaternary deposits are, but then these deposits are uh, not really very old. They are all within the last say 700,000 years. One would place them within the last 700,000 years or 750,000 years. So I've just included here some of important sites. So to sum up, how I mean, using all these localities, this is a very what you call this slide is, of course, too congested in the sense that the what you call that's all that's I mean it's very tiny, but just to give you an idea, we have these we have tried to build a biostratigraphy based on these finds, including very well dated sections in Pakistan and some in India, and those who from Nepal as well. So we see a good kind of biostratigraphic build up, which can be further improved as we move on. So right. So next part is now based on this biostratigraphy, we have also tried to figure out what kind of relationship the faunal dispersal had with the overall climatic changes or eustatic changes. So somehow we have been able to figure out that as the climate changed, the fauna changed, and there were several immigration or dispersal events. Whether it was a range expansion, range contraction, or migration, we are not very sure, but we could sort of tie the major events like first occurrence of proboscideans with some seafall and connection of the connection of Africa and Eurasia, and then also as the climate changed over a period of time, there were from overall forest environment towards more grassland dominant environment, where these have been very well represented by both paleosols as well as mammalian enamel isotopic data. So just try to correlate with the number of genera or any what you call increasing number of genera or decreasing genera in the subcontinent with the change in sea level fall, rise, or climatic changes. Then in the peninsular India, we have also seen some, as we move on from Siwaliks to the peninsular India, there were changes in the fauna, and there we see a lot of sort of extinctions in the Pleistocene of megafauna that included extinction of hexaprotodon, which thrived in the area for quite some time. So that included some of the fauna like Paleoloxodon, which was a huge elephant, and other mega herbivores. Now coming to paleo diet and ecology, which I have been looking at for quite some time now. So what we did was we looked at microwear and stable isotope, and in some cases hypsodonty as well, to find out what kind of diet these mammals had in the past. So of course hypsodonty is very well represented in evolutionary lineages of horses, where we see that brachydont horses were there when used to live in the forests, and as the ecological condition changed from forests to grasslands, hypsodonty index increased height of crown height increased. So we have also looked into these aspects of Siwalik mammals. Just to briefly tell you that isotopes are very important for reconstructing diet and ecology, and we have also used stable isotope oxygen and stable carbon and oxygen isotopes. And for the students, they can find it in literature that due to fractionation and by various plants like C3 plants and C4 plants, the carbon from the atmosphere gets fractionated, and by the time it reaches the feeder, like a pure C3 feeder will have a particular kind of a particular value of delta C13 value, and a pure C4 feeder will have uh, a particular delta C13 value. So these are sort of measured in terms of it's given here where we use a standard to compare, that is Vienna. This is PDB, that is belemnite, and anything which is lesser than the value standard would go into negative. Anything more than the standard would go into the positives. And so when a mammal that eats a C3 diet, it goes into its system and it goes into the enamel buildup, which is made up of calcium, phosphate. There you can see the hydroxyapatite, and we look at the carbon here, which tells us about the diet. So if a mammal is a predominantly C3 feeder, its delta C13 value would fall somewhere around minus 14 per mil, and somebody who is a pure C4 eater would fall somewhere 0.5 to 1 per mil. So it is represented in mil, not in percentage, because the values are very tiny, and mixed feeders would fall in between. So this very chart on your right hand side gives you an idea if what kind of fractionation you'll get in C3 and C4 plants, and by the time it reaches the enamel of a mammal, it gets further fractionated by 14 per mil. So these sort of studies I have done, we have done, and well, this very chart I have taken just to kind of elaborate upon the values you would get, delta C13 values you would get in a savanna grassland, and as you move on towards more closed areas, you'll get more negative values, which can be now the lower values are in the enamel. So if an animal that lives in a closed canopy area, you would expect the delta C13 values ranging between somewhere between minus 14 to minus 20 per mil. And that is also one can interpret the kind of rainfall. So I used well, one of very interesting aspect, that is I used the enamel structure, internal structure, to find out whether within one tooth can we find some variation of diet and ecology. So I took one of the Indopithecus or Gigantopithecus tooth, and then used Serling's lab. That is the tooth here, Indopithecus tooth, which has got a caries here, So that tells you that it was eating some sugary diet. That is, this has been dated to almost 9 million years. So I use Serling's lab to analyze this tooth using laser ablation. So laser would burn the enamel, just and that gas, that carbon dioxide, would then be passed through the mass spectrometer, which would then find out the percentage of or find out the delta C13 values. So took this tooth, bombarded it with laser ablation, and then also counted the growth lines. So each growth line represented some 10 to 12 days, uh, uh, which is also called as pericomata, and each pericomata is further divided into cross striation as shown in this very figure. This is a section of a tooth where these growth lines, they end up on the enamel surface. So I just what you call laser beamed the surface, so that to find out how much time I'm covering based on the laser pits. So looking at this, all these pits, this is one sample A, B is another sample, C is another sample. Likewise, I got some values of both carbon delta C13 as well as O18. Now oxygen, we all know, behaves in a very different manner, depends upon the temperature and rainfall. So primarily I was looking at diet. So when we look at that, so okay, to make it more robust, I actually counted the number of striation, cross striation inside each within each residuous lines. So this is one residuous line. This is another one. The white ones are residuous lines, and the black ones are the cross striation. These are daily secretions. So looking at the time covered, we found that we covered almost couple of years, almost 1.5 years or more. And then looking at this, we found that this very Indopithecus or this Gigantopithecus had a diet primarily of C3 fruits or leaves, but the oxygen values, they show some seasonality. So there is a possibility that there was some seasonality in the atmosphere. There was maybe monsoons were there. So one can get very high resolution dietary reconstructions based on laser ablation based stable isotopes. Beside this, we have also done some micro drillings. I'll come to those. So the other thing which we did to find out diet was microwear. We selected some of these primates. So a grazer would have more striations compared to a browser, and a browser would have some spits as well if it is thriving on harder material. And this very diagram gives you a broad idea where you if you count number of scratches, and average number of scratches falls somewhere around 30, then it would be a grazer. So an SEM photo would look something like this. We tried this on the tooth I just showed you, and that showed a lot of pits, not a grassy diet altogether. So we were pretty that confirmed our stable isotope results. And there was another primate that lived together with the Siwaliks rapids. It showed a lot of striations, but the problem was it showed striation as well as C3 stable isotope values. So it means it was not really eating grasses. Maybe it was thriving on C3 grasses or something like bamboos. So that's that's why it is important to apply both microwear as well as stable isotopes to understand more about the dietary aspects of such early mammals. So people have been able to figure out about the Gigantopithecus that lived in the Pleistocene 400,000 years ago based on the phytoliths. So they lived in the bamboo dominated areas. Now I also worked on elephants, and for that we chose a forest, Mudumalai down south, which is a seasonal monsoonal forest, and we took samples from the modern mammals, including elephants, cervids, and boas, and and langurs, and sweets, to figure out what kind of dietary aspects they have. So that we can apply our knowledge of present day faunal diversity on Siwalik fauna, how they would have chosen their dietary aspects, their diet and ecology. So this is one tooth of a present day elephant, and we did micro drilling, not laser, and that told us something about the diet. That is, diet remained almost C3 all through the development of the tooth, and oxygen, of course, behaved a little bit differently, maybe due to seasonal variation. So that led us to propose that early elephants were mostly we worked on the that was the present day form mammal. Then we applied this to the fossils. So we selected several fossils, proboscidean fossils, and we could see there is a shift in the dietary shift in the record in coinciding with the ecological shift. So most of the early elephants were C3 feeder, and they go into becoming grazers, and then at some point they again shift to, like the Elephas maximus today, shifts to browsing. And it's also reflected in hypsodonty index and mammalian and lamellar frequency, which has something to do with a dietary, more the lamellar. I mean, in grazers you have more lamellis, the plates. Also, we applied laser ablation to rats and mice because they are very tiny, and then collaborating with Larry Flynn, Louis Jacobs, Yuri Kimura, we could reconstruct that there was a shift in diet among the small mammals as well. The rodents, the murine rodents also shifted in their diet over a period of time, coinciding with the major ecological shift. So overall picture, which is still being generated and is worked upon, shows that as we move from middle Miocene to Pleistocene, the landscape was mostly replaced by grassland somewhere around between 9 to 7 million years. Of course, there are a lot of views whether it was synchronous or whether asynchronous, whether it happened at one time in the Potwar and the other time in the northeast. Not very sure, but overall picture shows that there were the browsers were being replaced by the grazers. So I would conclude by saying that Siwaliks offer a continuous archive, which would take us back almost 18 million years, and it's a rich record for studies like paleoecology, paleoclimatology, paleobiogeography, and also recently people have reported archaeological material, stone tools, and cut marks. So it is going to be an exciting future in this. And overall, when we look at the Siwaliks and other areas, mostly due to tectonic, climatic, and vegetation scenario, the composition has been changing over the years. So it was a dynamic domain, and it was kind of a crossroads, not a place where continuous endemic evolution took place. But there were evidences of local isolated endemic evolutions as well. And when we look at areas away from Siwaliks, like the Kutch, like the northeast Odisha basin, there we find that due to marine transgression, these deposits were formed, and not because of continuous sinking of the foreland like we see in the Siwaliks. There are a lot of gaps. It's still a huge, there are a lot of potential for future research. Like in India, the gap between 7 and 4 million years, it's very well evidence, and we know that we need a lot of work to fill in this. We do not know exactly what kind of faunal material, what kind of faunal change that was. So there are some of the gaps, like between the middle Pleistocene and the late Pleistocene, and we need to use more areas like Kaziranga for fauna for future for isotopes, so that we get a better comparison with the Siwaliks. So I would again thank Dr. I would again thank Bob, Mukhtar, Dr. Mukhtar Ghani, Irfanullah, and other organization of this series for giving me this opportunity. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
No, wonderful talk and beautifully illustrated, magnificent to see those migration pathways and to contemplate the amount of information that you've been able to compile. An amazing story. Perhaps Irfan and Mukhtar, you could open it up a little bit for questions. If you see anybody who can maybe raise their hand or indicate that they wish to pose a question, we could have some discussion.
Yes, we have a question from Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Patnaik, for such an interesting talk. Very much appreciated. I have a question about the peninsular sites.
Yep.
I'm curious to know how well the mammals from the peninsular sites are documented, and how similar or different those faunas are from the Siwalik series in the Foreland Basin.
Yes, when we look at the fauna from Kutch particularly, they are very similar to the Siwaliks. In fact, the new rodent finds we see, there are common elements in the Siwaliks. Of course, there are some differences, few of them, but mostly one can get a good idea, good correlation with the Siwaliks, because I feel that it was kind of continuous. The connections were continuous.
That's very interesting, because yes, one of the questions that I've raised, I've posed myself, but never been able to answer for the Potwar series is whether some of the immigrants that we see in our sequence might be simply coming from elsewhere in South Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, and wondered if, for example, they're coming from sites to the south that might be where those species might have originated, and then over some period of time have then eventually moved north toward the foreland basin.
Yeah, possible, but what we have so far found is middle Miocene sites are good. Early Miocene sites, we are not very sure whether they are early Miocene, because we need to work on the dates. We're not very sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any other question?
I'll ask. I'm curious to know a little bit more about the number of researchers that are working in India. Dr. Rajiv, I mean, are there many people, paleontologists working? Do you have a team of people? Tell us a little bit about the status of the research in terms of the community.
Oh yeah, you see, I have 8 students who are working towards PhD right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, and one student is working on Ladakh. Couple of them are working in Ramnagar area, that is the primate locality in the north, in the Siwaliks, and then couple of them are working in Kutch now, and rest working in the central part of these quaternary deposits. And then we have a small group in the sense in Wadia Institute, where early researchers have retired, but we have three active researchers who work on not only Siwaliks but also on Sabathu, Dakshai, I mean the early tertiaries. And then we have paleontologists who are mostly working on the Cretaceous. So these are like people who work on small mammals like Cretaceous mammals and Cretaceous dinosaurs and all.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically, when we look at the vertebrate community, we are all like students of Professor Sani who have settled at different places. Like Chandigarh, I work on mostly the Neogene and Quaternary. And in Dehradun and close by Dehradun, these people, they work on early tertiaries like the whales and uh, uh, related to whales and other things. And there is a group in Delhi who that is also a big team who work on Cretaceous mammals and dinosaurs and other. So overall, I would say around 20-25 paleontologists, vertebrate paleontologists, active paleontologists in India, including students as well as teachers.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have Professor Kasamjan from Center of Excellence in Geology. You want to have a question?
Please.
Professor Kasamjan sir?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm actually very intrigued by the presence of the fauna in Ladakh area.
Yep.
And I wonder if any of us would be interested in pursuing such studies in the Khoistan. I mean, we have, for example, very well-developed Jalipur molas. That may be a little younger.
Right.
But I'm sure there will be locations elsewhere within the Khoistan arc which might be worth the study. Thank you.
Absolutely. Because that was the place where India-Asia collision took place, and there are a lot of very interesting questions to be answered. For instance, the timing of the collision and the migration. When did the migration start or stop between the northern regions, and at what time the collision took place? Whether we can get any idea about from the fossils and detrital zircons. So it's a wonderful place to work on. Yep. I hope you I've answered your query, Professor Kasim.
Pardon me? Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think we don't have any other question.
So I'll ask another question. I'm curious about the
Sure.
Establishment of these migration pathways, and you mentioned that the subcontinent is almost like an intersection. I mean, there appear to be fauna that come in from maybe from the north or the northeast, as well as fauna coming in from what might be Africa.
Yeah.
And
Europe.
I was impressed with your map with the yellow lines on it, trying to start to illustrate how these animals might have moved. And it strikes me that there must have been, favorable ecosystems that allowed the animals to cross. Today, these are inhospitable areas. If you talk about, parts of the Persian Gulf and Iran.
Right.
And I must imagine that you are assembling sort of ecological maps of changes through time.
Right. We are working on those things. Yeah.
Because I think that it's it's intriguing to think about how the different faunas had to have favorable circumstances to be able to move, and following up on Catherine's comment about whether there were pockets of animals that lived in the central part of the peninsular India, or whether they actually came across from what today would be Saudi Arabia, or if they came down what would be Indochina.
Right.
I think.
Right.
I mean, these are fascinating questions that are very interesting even to the non-specialist. Just to imagine.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we have a question from Professor Gary.
Yes, Professor Gray Johnson.
Yes, Rati, thank you again for what you've done.
Most welcome.
My question has to do with the eggshells that you've discovered recently.
Yep.
And apiornithoid type eggshells suggesting, these large flightless birds that existed certainly in the Miocene and maybe even well into the Pliocene.
Right.
What's your current thoughts about such things as ostrich and the apiornithoid type flightless birds?
Well, we find these right from middle Miocene till around 50,000 years, like they were there. Say 25,000 years. So to begin with, the evidence would suggest that they were there already, and the early differentiation might have happened somewhere around maybe when we look at the breakup of the continents and then spread of all the continents to different corners of the globe, and then you have the flightless bird occupying different areas. But as far as ostrich goes, there is every likely that migration between the African continent, and Europe, that is Eurasia, and some West Asia was kind of going on, because there are such eggshells. These have been found at these places. But in the Pleistocene time, it looks like these they look more like the African ones. Like one particular kind of eggshells we have found has got these big spots with lot of holes. These are very similar to the Somali ostrich. So there is every possibility that in the Pleistocene there was some sort of either corridor where uh, m- ostrich could migrate from East Africa towards Indian subcontinent, or the early humans, they brought them together, brought them with them. So that is very intriguing. The Pleistocene ostrich, which seems like very similar to the Somali ostrich we have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's an interesting problem, and
Yeah, it is.
you know, obviously these little fragments are difficult to find, but I've always worried about some of these things being float and possibly introduced by humans, particularly the
Humans, yeah.
yeah.
Harithalangar find was really amazing. I mean, I could not. It was. I just found these small pieces, and then I just dug up the paleosol, and they just kept coming out. So I was pretty sure that it is in situ. And later on, when I compared them, so they looked very similar to the early what you call Eurasian ostriches.
Yeah, the ones with the big spots with a lot of holes, Samornis or something comes to mind.
Yeah.
In North Africa, but I think what you've seen, I have not seen in the Siwaliks. So, you know, there's probably several taxa of these large flightless birds at that time. And, you know, it's just the luck of the draw if you find one.
Yep. One has just been found by one of my students from Pinjore. So it's very exciting.
Good.
Yeah.
Bob, Mukhtiar, back to you.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Catherine Beasley.
Yeah, please, Catherine.
Thank you. Well, I hope that I'm not keeping up everybody so late that I can't ask another. But I'm as I think about what you've told us, and I think about the area that I studied for many years in Pakistan, I'm curious about whether or not how many of the localities where you work have plant fossils. These are very, very rare in the Potwar Plateau, and we miss them. We wish they were there. But I do know from the literature that there are some very good plant localities in India and Nepal, and of Siwalik, the Siwalik sequence. So I'm wondering how often you've encountered plant fossils.
Yes, quite often. In fact, we have found plant fossils in Ramnagar, which is equivalent to Chinji. And these are basically impressions on sandstone. And also we do find these gray colored bands, very, very thin bands, and they often yield pollens and spores. So we look for, we look for those, we look, in fact, we deliberately look for these very tiny little layers, gray bands. And one of my student who is basically a paleobotanist, she's enrolled with me, but she works on pollens and spores. So she does the analysis at Birbal Sahani Institute, Lucknow. And so she does all these identification of pollens and spores and leaf fossils. So we do find them.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
So I think we don't have any other question. So Professor Bob, we can round.
Yeah, I think I'll just mention, Catherine, that one of the items that we used to note in the Upper Siwaliks in the Jhelum area, there are these dark bands, and we noted them on our measured sections. They're thin, dark bands, and I don't know if anybody's ever looked in them for pollen and spores. I think that it is conceivable that there are places that, particularly in the Upper Siwaliks, this would be in the so-called Sawan Formation, but it might be that it would warrant some more looking.
Yes, absolutely. I'll put my money on them.
Well, the other thing another thing of note, and maybe we can get her to give a talk, is that there's a group of people at the University of Pennsylvania, or sorry, maybe Penn State, where Kate Freeman is, who have been looking at biomarkers, and in particular the biomarkers that indicate fire, and have found an increase in fire frequency from the middle to the late Miocene in the Potwar sequence. And we did notice that there was an increase in charcoal that we could see in hand specimens when in some of in the later Miocene sediments there. So I wonder if some of these dark bands might actually have some charcoal remnants.
True. We have found a lot of charcoals in Middle Siwaliks and burnt grass and woody stuff in Pliocene. We do find them.
Wow.
Yep. There is some evidence of forest fire going back all the way to Middle Miocene. Yeah.
Wow.
That would be definitely worth publishing.
Yep. Sure.
Well, I want to thank everybody very much for participating, and I want to invite you to I'll just mention that next week we have Peter Clift from Louisiana State University. He'll be talking about the monsoon history and a little bit about source to sink sediments coming down into the Indus Fan. The following week we have Andrew Miggs from Oregon State University. He'll be talking about structural geology, a little bit about seismology and seismic hazards in Pakistan. And then that's followed by Kay Berensmeyer from the Smithsonian. So we've got wonderful speakers coming up, and I look forward to seeing you all a week from today. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And good morning and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, everybody. My compliments to Rajiv Patnaik, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Most welcome.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much, and a very nice presentation.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for the opportunity.
And a great pleasure to meet you, and I'm looking forward to having future conversations.
Absolutely. I'm also looking forward to have you here.
Yeah, I look forward to it very much.
Yeah. Okay.
If you